you guys have been on Lake Superior, you obviously have an interest in it. How many people are paddlers? Got a few of you. Right on. People want to get into paddling. It's a good place to be. I was amazed by. I just went to the South Shore of Lake Superior for my first time last summer, and I visited Bayfield, Wisconsin, and Munising and the Pictured Rocks, and just kind of went for a rip around there. And I'm like, holy crap! I saw like 100 people in the water at one time, and I'm like, that's probably as many people that visit the part of Canada that I'm going to show you in like 3 years. So, and I saw it all in like 2 hours, 2 hour sunset tour, so it's crazy. But anyway, let's take you on this. I got a few different names for this place. So stories, landscapes, travel, protection, a slow movement, perspectives, untraveled and culture in the North Shore Lake Superior. So my friend Daryl Macon, I've done a lot of travels with. We kind of formulated this presentation off another one that he had, and kind of our stories and perspectives are amalgamated and collaborated together on a book that we printed a few years ago as well. So yeah, it's when we talk about stories. Another name, never let the facts get in the way of a good story, people, events, and other extrapolations along the North Shore of Lake Superior. So going to do a little introduction, talk about facts and ecological significance. We're going to talk a bone to pick with you Americans, and talk about some of the mapping history with the border, and just funny how like different parts of Lake Superior like got designated U.S. and Canada, and it's kind of a funny history with that, but gives you a sense of place, and really like the borders don't mean anything, and you guys should just go up and not be afraid to go into Canada because there's lots of cool things to do. There's just not a lot of info on it. So what Lake Superior represents to me, connection to the First Nations, like the native people of the area, the fur trade, commercial fishing, mining, lighthouses, railway, present day land stratifications, all the different land designations, present day stakeholders, conservation movements, light stations, trails, private stewardship, and most importantly, dudes and boats. All the cool people that just rock the North Shore and have a good time in their boats, helping people out and connecting. So good news about the future and how you guys could explore this area if you're interested. So those who have never seen Superior get an inaccurate idea by hearing it spoken of the lake. Those of you guys who know Lake Superior, even on the South Shore, it's all one body of water. They call it inland sea, right? It's a big body of water. And I just got my timer. So not go over time. And George Grant, a quote that he did in about 1870 on a Sir Sanford Fleming expedition. They canoed the whole North Shore, kind of getting to know it, and got a feel for that intensity of what it is. So Little John and Drew are other powerful writers. Little John and Drew contrast the lake, and some quotes from the book Superior, the Haunted Shore, if anybody you guys are familiar with that. They also traveled the shore in canoe. And they contrast power and fragility, the immensity of landscape opposed to the astonishing resiliency of delicate plant and animal life, the humbling insignificance of the human record beside that of rocks of Lake Superior, 10 restless millennial against 3 billion somber years of existence. And that's Lawrence Harris painting of the Cobble, and it's a Group 7 artwork, which I'll show you some more of that a little bit more, just a cool, fascinating culture area. So facts and ecological considerations. This is just air photography of Lake Superior. I study it like obsessively, especially like this time of year because I do ice paddling and get out there as much as I can, breaking through the ice. So look at different satellite imagery and see some amazing cloud formations of how it simulates an alpine environment. It has a sensitivity to it, a really special place where plants that grow in the tops of mountains above the tree line grow on the Canadian North Shore and have weird distribution patterns throughout. And they're also sensitive to our impacts. And this is another view that highlights the top of the lake where I spend all my time and love it. I just think that's a cool hairdo to the wolf's head. The eye, right? You guys see that? There's even a book and a guy from the States wrote about the wolf's head, and it talks about stories from the lake, a lot from Isle Royale, the relationship with moose and wolves there, but it's a pretty cool imagery. I just love the shape of that lake. So Lake Superior facts: 10% of the Earth's surface water, fresh available surface surface water. Antarctica is about 79–80% of that's where I work in the winter months, down in Zakaigai off a cruise ship in Antarctica, and it's about 80% of the world's fresh water is trapped in ice down there. But this is 10% of the Earth's available fresh water. So just so you can distinguish the difference, and just imagine how big it is. 82,000 square kilometers. Sorry if I work in metrics and crazy mile stuff here. Largest lake in the world by surface area, 563 kilometers in length and 257 kilometers in width. Average depth of 170 meters, max depth of 406 meters, 12,100 square cubic kilometers of water total. Average annual water temperature 4 degrees Celsius. I don't know if someone know what that is in Fahrenheit, like 50 degrees, 40 something. It's cold year round. So water current moves, and right now it's probably hovering just above the freezing mark and out on the lake. But as the summer moves, it might get up to 20 degrees Celsius, like 70 something Fahrenheit, and work around. But then the next day, a south wind might blow and blow cold currents from the middle of the lake towards the north shore and change the water temperature. So average annual water temperature is about 4 degrees. And average underwater visibility of the lake is 9 meters, in places reaches over 30 meters. Just crystal clear, beautiful, untouched water. And waves over 12 meters in heights have been recorded on Lake Superior, breaking the windows of lighthouses towering above the lakes. That's a pretty good height, like 30-something feet or something. But yeah, just some facts for you. There's another air photo of the Canadian North Shore there. It just gives you cool perspective. So first I wanted some beefs with the states. I'm going to talk about Benjamin Franklin back during the Treaty of Paris in 1783. I'll just fact check a couple notes here if I can get this right. But it was the Treaty of Paris was like the development of the British North America and the U.S. boundary, right? Figuring out where that is. And there's different maps. So the Jesuits, you guys might be familiar with the Jesuit missionaries traveling the lake in like 1670, and they called it La Tracy Superior, and drew it fairly accurate. Like Mountaineering named the good place is what Isle Royale was called historically. And Lake Superior is actually called Glacial Lake Menong back like 10,000 to 20,000 years ago as the glaciation came in and flooded down from way up in northern Manitoba with Glacial Lake Hastings, where Lake Manitoba, Lake Winnipeg is now, and the Hudson Bay Lowlands, just like massive amounts of water flooded down and carved out the Superior country on the North Shore, so everything up here. But the early map makers depicted this actually, like one of the first maps of the lake is somewhat accurate compared to some of the other ones I'm going to show you. And this is Coronelli, one of the best Italian map makers at the time, depicted the lake in this way with Isle Royale kind of over that way, and just a little bit different shapes. And then as time went on, into the 1700s, there's Zada and Vaughan that kind of made fictitious islands on the lake and kind of showed it. Showed the position of the islands like further towards, and this is the Kaministiquia River they marked, which is actually like quite a bit. It's through the river that comes into Thunder Bay and floods out to the lake. But that was like the border of the country. But then they changed it to the Pigeon River based on some of these fictitious maps, and it gets kind of complicated where this river here lines up and these islands that are Ile Menong, Isle Royale. So anyway, a long story short, the beef with that, like some people say, Canada should own Isle Royale, and there's an argument amongst that because Benjamin Franklin, the president back during that Treaty of Paris, defining the borders, was like, oh, he knew they were fictitious and intentional. He's like, yeah, I want that in the States because I want copper on that island. So it ended up becoming part of your country, which it's Michigan, and it gets more complicated politically, which I'm not going to get into. and it's like technically in Minnesota or Canada, but it's Michigan, which is fun. But anyway, it's just different perspectives of the lake. And then there's a Canadian fur trader, Henry Hanwell, late 1700s, that made a map that's almost square, but has some like Ile Royale and then Michigan Island and the North Shore, like it's just kind of there. And then the master map maker of all time, the Voyager, David Thompson, during the David Thompson Brigade in the early 1800s, made this map, which is somewhat accurate, a lot better. I'm kind of looking at where it goes, and though he doesn't really have IRL there, but he kind of has the shoreline fairly accurate with the curve and Puckasaw and all that. So that's the area he traveled through, obviously. Then we got Bayfield, who was the famous explorer that really mapped, who's American, that mapped the lake in really good detail. So that's a detail, zoom in on the Canadian North Shore. And then this is his map of the entire lake, showing that, like what we see it as today as a wolf's head, right? So, and Ile Royale is like kind of in Canada in terms of latitude, but it's in the U.S. So anyway, I like you guys. I don't really care what the history is. I just don't. The borders it's really not that scary. I could go through all the time, and you can get an I-68 to paddle back and forth, no problem. Smuggle all the drugs you want. Now that cannabis is legal in Canada, you got a business going, right? But this is the designated area for the Lake Superior National Marine Conservation Area, which is the area that I have come to know and love over the last 15 years or so. And for me, it started with maps and just looking at this area and being like, wow, I want to go out there, because it's a lot less accessible, because you guys are familiar with the Minnesota North Shore or the North Shore. If somebody says the North Shore, you immediately think of the Minnesota North Shore, but this is further north, and I think of that as the Western Shore, but or Northwestern to be perfect. But all of these islands here are roadless, right? And this island paradise, journey into the island paradise, that I like to call it, is all along this coast that's designated in this marine conservation area. So yeah, this is there's so many different land designations here. So there's in the U.S., it's about 90% of the land on the South Shore, the Northwest Shore, all the way around to Sault Ste. Marie is private. 90% approximately, right? You got some parks, you got the Hawthorne, you got National Lake Shores and things like that, but a lot of it's private. So there isn't anything like BLM land. You have the Bureau of Land Management where you can kind of go and stay places for free. In Canada, there's Crown land. So Crown land is 90%, and about 10% is private, if that. And then there's like provincial nature reserves and areas of scientific interest and provincial parks, and then Puckasaw, which is like a national park. So I'll talk a little bit more about land designations as we go, but maps are important, a big part of it. And I want to highlight this island here, because this is called Pie Island, and I'm going to talk about how I got kind of connected to Lake Superior and paddling out to there, which is kind of a very mysterious, interesting island with lots of stories and mysteries about it. A guy actually, I think his name was Saint Germain, he's a voyager in like the late 1700s, actually signed an affidavit to confirm that he saw a mermaid. He actually saw a mermaid on Pie Island. But it has this really interesting energy that I'm kind of scared of, but I'm also excited by, and I find that all throughout the Canadian North Shore. It's just amazing. And like everywhere on the lake's energy is present, and the place names of all the different places. And the city, St. Ignace is like the second largest island, Lake Superior, next to Isle Royale, and it's named after St. Ignatius Loyal, the head of the Jesuit order. There's a whole bunch of place names from families in Rossport that are named after the Rossport Islands. And the maps provide vital information for travel, but also hinted at the secrets and culture of the place. So that's that pretty much. So Pie Island, this is me. 2003, 2004. A long time ago. I couldn't quite grow a beard yet, but I was a university student at Lakehead's University Outdoor Recreation Parks and Tourism program, and I wanted to get in the outdoors, and they was a small outfitter that used to be owned by the guy that has Wapikini Outfitters, flying trips and he did wild waters canoe kayak. So I had a friend that worked there. So like, hey, cool, let's get some boats and just paddle out of the lake. And I think it's about like 26 kilometers, maybe about 13 miles of open water to get there. And we had to break through the ice in April to get out of the McIntyre River. And then we just got in the boats, and it was calm and beautiful. And we just like, oh, we're down on Pie Island. Let's do it. We had no marine radio. There's no people that didn't really have cell phones at that time. We didn't tell anyone where we're going. We didn't, I think we had a really crappy map that we could hardly look at. And we didn't have wetsuits or dry suits or proper safety gear. I don't even think we had throw bags or pumps. All these lemons, right? Horrible things, like people are like, oh man, you're an absolute idiot. I'm not going to ever go paddling with you. Because it was a dumb mistake. But this was my first experience with Lake Superior, and I was absolutely awestruck when we broke through this ice, lined our boats over the ice, and put it in the open water, and I'm that close to the water in my kayak. And those of you guys that spend time, I have a history of canoeing background, and I love canoeing, growing up canoeing in Algonquin Park and getting to know Lake Superior through my dad, who grew up in Wawa on the Eastern Shore. As a kid coming up for Scout Jamboree in 1997, I was like 12, 13, and I was like, well, I got to go here for school. There's something about this place. I got to get on the lake. I got to spend more time out there. So we went across. We did an overnight there and back, had really great weather. There's a really sad story. A girl that I knew over a year later, went out here in an open canoe without preparing, because I didn't know, and this is like a big eye-opener for me, and she drowned. They capsized in big 2-3 meter huge waves coming in off Pie Island, and they didn't tell anyone when they had to go, but she had to get back because she had work or something, some commitment, right? And couldn't wait for the weather, didn't really know how to read the weather. I didn't know how to read the weather at this time either. I was lucky. That could have been me. With my friends, I might not be here right now, and she's not here right now to tell her story, and it was a really sad, unfortunate event. But when that happened, it really opened up my eyes. I'm like, I really need to learn about this lake and understand it and feel that it's powerful energy. It's a dangerous place. There's a spiritual energy on this island that I'm intrigued by. I want to go out there. I'm challenged by it. I did this trip, and there's a quote I'm going to read. Yeah, this one. So with the speed of motorboats and the ease of access, something intangible is cut off here. It has been lost. Perhaps it's the zest for life we felt when real danger lurks near. A zest which sharpens all perceptions and experiences. Although the islands and their surroundings haven't changed appreciably in the last few centuries, our view of them, our appreciation has. Ease has diminished them. When less is risk, less is gained. This has been a big life lesson for me. And it's a balancing act between like knowing what you're doing, but then also just getting the hell out there and going and doing it, taking the risk. Because there's something about that. I did that with my friends, and we were lucky, but I did that and I was just like, wow, like this zest for life. I was just like, it was like the biggest adrenaline rush in my life, but it's not like that's what I crave, but it's a feeling I had when I was out there that I'm like, something is bigger. I was just humbled. I was like, wow, I want to learn more about this place. I feel so blessed to have this weather, share this experience with these people. I work in outdoor education, and there's perceived risk and actual risk, and I can study analysis of all that, working with Outward Bound, a whole bunch of places around the world on a global scale, understanding and teaching people about the idea of risk, and I could get a whole presentation just on this. But it's something to think about, and I think there's just a lot less risk taken in our society with like playground acts and safety and management and just outdoor education and all of this. And it needs to be in place, but the actual risk and the perceived risks need to be gained, and understanding and making good judgment calls, being conservative about what you're doing, and having the proper education on the area needs to be in place. So I think it's a balancing act between like just flying by the seat of your pants and going, which I think there's value to, but there's also, you need to know how to do a few things if you're going to push that risk and know how much to do it. And I've been lucky, and I've learned by being an idiot, a reckless idiot back 15 years ago when I was first getting into this. But now I've just learned a lot, and I want to educate people in the right way so I don't see people dying out there and like hearing about accidents like happened in the Apostle Islands last year, and people not knowing the right equipment and boats to use, and knowing the weather and how to read the weather is a whole game in itself, which is a fascinating place, and how it works different places around the world. So this is me, and I got a beard now. A couple years later, I think it's 2006, I got a job in Rossport at Superior Outfitters, and this is where I kind of got connected to the lake and guided trips out there and learned more about reading it, and went out with friends on lots of trips. And some of these friends are like my lifelong friends, you know, that I see. They're all over Canada now, from the Yukon to Calgary to BC to the East Coast. And I keep in touch with these people, and they're really good friends because we shared time together on the lake in these sacred places and enjoyed each other's company. I did, with my two best friends at the time, Jess and Aaron, I formulated a 50-day sea kayak expedition as part of my university studies with Lakehead, and our objectives of that were, I did a directed camp study and campsite analysis, because when I worked in Rossport in 2006, I was like, hey, Dave Tamlin, the owner of the outfitter there, was like, write a guidebook in the area, because nobody really knows. Daryl Macon, this guy's a prof at the school, I had him for one course. He's like, connect with him, talk to him. He wrote a thesis on it, and I took his thesis and started getting notes and started talking to everyone who knew the lake, loved and lived for it. Any paddlers, I met a lot of Americans that paddled the area and arrived in Rossport. I'm like, where did you camp? What did you see? I had the big map of the area, and I just marked it up, getting notes and studying and thinking about it. And I'm like, well, this is a lot. And so from 2006, I did this trip, planned it out. We got a lot of support and funding, and Stephen Harper, the Prime Minister of Canada at the time, announced that there was going to be that protected area that I showed you in the map previous. And we planned this out, and I did a directed study analyzing campsites, working with the Ministry of Natural Resources on their Ontario parks, like the park that you see for provincial parks, and mapped out campsites and points of interest, and did a campsite analysis form, designed it with them. That's now used standard for all of the parks in Ontario, and even in BC, they're using it for their provincial parks. And using this to analyze and monitor use of campsites, because this area is fairly inaccessible. Nobody really gone out and got that information. So that was a research study. My friend Aaron's did a thesis on human impact of coastal sensitivity. He's presented at a few. He went to a big conference in Madison, and another one in Twin Cities as well, presenting his information and findings from that. But that's like scientific side of things, looking at plant and sensitivity in correlation to the campsites. And then Jess looked at risk management for paddlers, studying case scenarios that happened on our trip and previous case scenarios, and writing up how risk can be mitigated but managed, and then the actual versus perceived risk pursuit, so people can come to these areas and have a safe, enjoyable experience. Lake Superior Research Group, the LSRG, is our thing that we coined. I tried to keep it going, but life and love and adventures brought me to other places in the world, and different things that happened for a number of years, so it slipped away. But now I have my own thing I'm going to talk about later, but this is still a meaningful thing, and I want to do more research with universities, more meaningful work, and people with learning experience. So Ken Storm's in the room right now. I did a presentation with him on a trip in Patagonia that we did, but I met him when I worked, I'm going back. This is Ken here, and my friends in the trip, and one of our professors that joined us for a few sections of the trip that we did in that summer of 2008, mapping out. And he has a cabin where he's like a private steward of a small island off Rossport, and his mentality of deeper learning and understanding really inspired me to write and publish this book with Daryl, and just get more information on the area, to build an educational database, essentially, and further learning, and doing it in a way that still promotes that sense of discovery. So that's been a lot of impact, and we've gone on to do other adventures in other parts of the world and connect it all together. I led a number of university expeditions, like 4 or 5 trips in the summer for 2 weeks into the area. Expedition-based, skill-based, experiential education learning along the way. So this is some shots from some of those trips. Doing like surfing and stuff on the Terrace Bay coast. And then meeting up, we met up in the middle of nowhere one time with another group, and we have that's like the most amount of people I've ever seen on the Canadian North Shore one time. So. And then in 2017, I moved back to Thunder Bay in 2016, figuring out what I wanted to do, and I did a Métis trip with Métis. It's one of the 3 Indigenous groups in Canada, along with so the Métis, First Nations, and Inuit are the three like indigenous groups, and Knowles Denhart was one of the participants on that expedition, who's Métis, and his family's actually from Grand Portage area, just across the border. And when did you immigrate to Canada?
It's probably after the war. My great-grandfather was German.
Yeah, so German mixed with like Ojibwe and like the French fur trade background is kind of like a mixed indigenous group that is there's so many of the people that have their own culture and experience. So this was a 4-month trip, 2,200 kilometers from Ottawa to Kenora across the entire province of Ontario in a 34-foot Montreal canoe. So I was asked to do that trip because I had a lot of experience on the lake and knew we could travel safely with the group. And we went and did events in different towns doing heritage interpretation and teaching people about it. And we had to sail on the boat and rock the guitar. It was awesome. And I had traditional costume, a big mess of getting gear organized, and you can imagine, and then doing jigging dancing, and this is me doing it too, which is kind of fun. I learned how to do some of the traditional dances and at some of the festivals we went along the way. I think this was one in Sault Ste. Marie, but it was all along the Canadian side of the lake, and there was 16 youth. I'm trying to remember how many, but it was quite a group. And yeah, this is the boy along the Canadian North Shore flying the Métis flag. Oh, yeah, and it's a spectacular vessel to travel on the lake and actually very seaworthy. So, and it goes with making decisions as well where you go. But we were along the Puckasaw Coast in the National Park on the Canadian North Shore, and we had like 25, 30 knot winds. And we could still plow through this because it was offshore, like going off the shore, and we could still plow through the bays and just get like these whirlwind tornadoes of wind. And this thing with all of our gear and weight, we just like ferrying into the wind, like you ferry on a river. But if it was coming from the open water, the wind's a totally different story, and it would be scary as hell. And I'm sitting up for a couple days waiting for it. So, and swell, it's kind of funny. We did a couple surf landings and taking on water and having to bail it out. But generally, they're pretty safe. They have flotation in the front and back, and we have bailing devices. We can bail water out, and they're right. But generally, just make good decisions and don't go out. In the days of the Voyageur, they would go out and paddle like 50, 100 miles, like huge distances, and like all day and night. People would fall overboard. They just leave and keep going. That was like, and they're transporting these heavy boats of fur. So they would bring them. They would go back and forth, empty up to the Fort William historical. They have a historical park that kind of is in rendition, and Knowles has worked there, and he's an interpreter there, giving some of what the reality of that place was when people came in these canoes and arrived in Thunder Bay and took these furs, unloaded or loaded up the furs, and had these heavy boats, and they're actually more stable than the boats being empty. So when they have gear and fur, they ride pretty nicely through the water. And they're 34 feet, take like 14 pounders with gear. So now I'm going to get into some of the mysteries and Porphyry Island is one of the lighthouses. This is some of Daryl's old photos because he has a big connection with this place, like I was with Pie Island. This is off the Signal Peninsula. Now, the Canadian Lighthouses of Lake Superior has resurrected this in some of the buildings and made like a B&B that now there's organized boat trips on a weekly basis out there for camping and Airbnb. You can buy a membership for $20. It kind of supports it and keeps it going. And we have a series of fundraising events. But just mysteries of like, oh, these cars are out here, families lived out there, and it's like in the middle of nowhere, you see these like 1920s cars hanging out. It's like, whoa, kind of a mystery and interesting story with the lighthouse cultures. And this is like some of the families that lived out there way back. And the stories with this rock was actually like a very significant historical significance for the First Nations people. And I think in the 1970s, a storm and the ice like blew it over and knocked it over. So it's not really there anymore. But it used to be like kind of a navigation aid, a natural navigation aid that they used to get out to the islands. And then the families that lived out there. One guy had like 8 kids, and there's a really good book called The Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter that tells stories of that. I should have had a slide of that, but I'm going to write that down. The Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter is a really great book that tells stories of people learning about that lighthouse. Battle Island is another big lighthouse off the I don't know. This is Bert. I was fortunate enough to meet him he was the last lighthouse keeper on at least the Canadian side of the Great Lakes. That was like from the days where they lit them they had somebody there and they're not like automated solar panels. But he lived out there just afterwards. They all got automated in like the early mid-70s, and he just stayed out there in the summers because he loved it and has stories about the lake. And this is way up here. I don't know how high, but this top window has a crack in it. It's broke through in a storm in like the late 70s. So that's just an idea of how high that is and what the lake can do. But it's probably one of the quintessential lighthouses on Lake Superior that's absolutely epic. And now there's a friends group of Friends of Battle Island lighthouses that are trying to build stuff, working with Canadian lighthouses in Lake Superior. But there's a lot of progress going on in Canada, and it's a lot different from the US side of the lakes because there's a lot more people, a lot more closer to a lot bigger populations of people that kind of rush to these areas. Like Bayfield and Munising, I couldn't believe the tourism and how many people were out there, which is a beautiful area. But there's just a lot of people there, and there's nobody really up here, and it makes it special with all these places. Actually, I want to go back one other story. This is called Battle Island because during the Riel Rebellion, Louis Riel was a big, during the fur trade with the Métis people. He's a really famous Métis person from Red River area, which is like where Winnipeg, Manitoba is. And he came through this area and thought he heard gunshots off the lake from somebody who was like paranoid about battles going on and stuff. And so it's like he got named Battle Island, but I think inevitably those sounds he heard just the cracking of the ice. So, but it's another story of the place. There's really unique, beautiful rock formations that resemble like Giant's Causeway in Ireland. People go all over the world to see it, and this is just like towering cliffs of places all over the south shore of Simpson Island off Rossport. And then the north side of Simpson Island is another island that, like on the traditional Silver Isle, the Rossport route, which I'll talk about more. Not a lot of people visit the north side, but there's interesting histories with different rock formations and ancient riverbeds that evidence of these riverbeds that are protruding from the rock. Like this weird sandstone, like Sibley rock formations, what we call the red rock. You get a lot of there's like sandstone formations with those red sea caves down in the Apostle Islands, which you're probably familiar with too. It's a similar type of material. And there is sea caves and beautiful arches and interesting formations as well on the North Shore. In abundance is just a couple pictures of them. And agates, there's lots of agates in huge abundance as well that are littering beaches, and they're not picked like crazy like the sort of North Shore, though they still wash up and you can still find them. But some interesting rocks that are found out there. Okay, Arctic alpine disjunct plants. It's a complicated word. But these plants are super fascinating because I talked about briefly before. These grow in alpine environments. So some of these are, this is a crowberry. It grows on really exposed outer islands of the outer coast that are sheltered from like a boulder or another plant. So it's like super sheltered, extreme environment plant. This is a saxifrage root flower, and this is butterwort. It's like an insectivorous, and it eats other things. This is like a bluebell that's pretty commonly seen around. So the summer months, like mid-June, late June, early July, they have different seasons of flowering, but absolutely stunning. Some rocks are just littered in these and cool things. And this is butterwort. You can see in flower, which is Ken's photo, which I've never, they've only bloomed for a very short period of time, and flies, you can see some of the flies land on it, and the plant gets its nutrients from the bugs. And these grow in kind of sheltered splash pool environments. So like freshwater flat splash pool environments. And I've gone to like the ocean and the west coast and east coast, and I look in these splash pool environments, but the tidal splash pool environments is a whole different ecosystem. And Lake Superior and Canadian North Shore, you can see it on like Royal and all around the Minnesota North Shore, and even parts of rocky areas on the south shore around Marquette that I've seen similar splash pool environments. But it has its own unique flora and fauna that's pretty sensitive to human impact, trudging and walking all over. This is Devil's Club on Porphyry Island. If you guys have ever been to like Olympic Peninsula, Vancouver Island, West Coast, Coast Mountains, this grows in huge abundance, and it's very annoying and very thorny and awful, but it's a subalpine plant, and this grows in the forest on Porphyry Island. It's pretty crazy. And now they have interpretive signs about the history of some of these plants on the island, but this is just a kind of unique sense of place there. These are terrace beaches, lichen heath communities, so like huge amounts of this thick lichen. If you step on that, it just gets crushed and flattened and then stops growing, and it takes hundreds of years to grow. And I find campsites all the time on some of these islands, and it just pisses me off. We go and destroy the campsites and make it look pristine again whenever I see rocks built up in a fire pit and like a weird plant growing out of the rocks from the nutrients of the ashes that come in. So it's just like a eyesore. I don't see it a lot anymore, but sometimes I still see people that are just uneducated on the impact of these. So the sites I chose were not on terrace beaches. You just got to be, they're just super sensitive, and they kind of are a history of lake levels over like a period of 3,000 to 7,000 years. And you might have heard of Pukassaw pits. So these are some Pukassaw pits that we went in and examined. You can see for scale, and they're all prevalent in Pukassaw National Park, but also in the Lake Superior National Marine Conservation Area further up, all along the North Shore, in hidden spots on remote outer islands. So it's the history of like what they are. So were they like vision quests? Because some of them outlook and overlook vast areas of the lake. So like for vision quests, like terminal woodland people back 10,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago during that time would maybe go out there for vision quests and like a fasting experience, or they would just like watchmen guardians for upcoming buyers, or they're made as shelters, or some that there's one in Pukassaw National Park. These pits, they're up elevated on these raised terrace beaches, but they could have been used for fish traps or shelters or anything when the lake was out. Right? So it's a mystery of what they are. And even I've gone into up in like that Judge something park by the border, or Judge, sorry? Judge Maggie, sorry, and the Cascade River, all up and down there. If you walk up the rivers, there's terraces as well, and you can see these Pukassaw pits, which might have been used for like hunting or something like that, because they're up high on the riverbed, and you can see kind of over both sides. And if you envision the trees not being there and just being a pit like this up high, they could have been used for that. So there's different, lots of different perspectives on that. But interesting mystery. And the voyageurs I talked about with my trip a little bit, traveling through the area, and Daryl actually found this fork. Whoop. It's from broadly dated from like the 1700s. Found it in Shishu Bay, one of the main bays in the Black Bay Peninsula archipelago. And it was pretty impressive to see that he found that just lying on a beach as like an artifact from the 1700s, like stories from our past that get that deeper perspective on the place. Talbot Island, this is another old lighthouse station. A map here, this is way off of like the South Shore sitting this island in the middle of the area, super remote. Cliff shoreline, really beautiful place. We've gone out there paddling when calm enough. This has a history. There used to be a lighthouse way on this point here, and there's still an old foundation up in the rocks and the cliffs. But 3 lighthouse keepers died in like 4 seasons there, or 5 seasons, I think it was. So they decommissioned the lighthouse. Like, this is the lighthouse of doom. And that's a whole story, and I have a big write-up in the book, a bigger write-up that tells it in a little bit more detail about the different lighthouse keepers and their names. And one of their grave sites is on nearby Bowman Island there. You can visit it. Just the past and the power and perseverance of it. This is me and Daryl. We found this red truck with a group of students one year. There's a lake, and you can see this island like in the middle around here. That's just called Red Truck Lake, and we're like, Red Truck Lake. I bet there's got to be a red truck there. We don't know. We've heard there was, but never met anyone that actually found it. So we took our students 2 or 3 kilometers, about a mile and a bit into the bush, no trails, rugged, super thick, rugged terrain, and walked around the lake. And oh my God, we were excited. I almost lost some fluids, but it was so exciting that we found this truck. But it's a relic of the past as well. 1910, 1920s, a lot of logging was going on in these islands, but then the Great Depression came and it just all got abandoned. And things like this are just hidden in the middle of this super rugged terrain out on these islands. So that was pretty cool just to get a perspective on that history. First Nations, so there's now they have like water keepers from the First Nations Reserve that are keeping this new Lake Superior Water Trail, which is a water trail of campsite and information that goes all along the Canadian North Shore. They're even building like docks for people with disabilities so they can get in kayaks with ease and just like kind of easily slide in off docks, and interpretive boards and centers in some of the communities along the way. So the McGuffins, Gary and Joey McGuffin, you might have heard of some of them. They're on the Lake Superior Watershed Council, which a lot of it works with the U.S. side as well to protect and preserve the lake. And on the North Shore, they're working with the First Nations to protect them. One of the best ways to kind of get a perspective with the First Nations is going to one of their powwows all summer long. They have a powwow calendar along the Canadian North Shore and inland to Quetico and up to like all around to Winnipeg and old like the First Nations groups and their traditional dance and ceremonies. Is a pretty powerful and humbling experience to see how these guys celebrate and live for the lake. And we met with elders from these places when we were doing the book to just get their perspective, because like we want to know how we can express some of their not tell their stories, but understand that they have all their stories are landscape. So all landscape are story. So just this rock, for instance, has a story about why that was there off Rossport, and there's an eagle's nest up in the tree that has a story, and traditional ecological knowledge. There's the water keepers and protectors that monitor that through modern technology, GPS, GIS and all that. And it's interesting working with them and knowing how they value and have sacred places of the land, but tell stories about the serpent and the raven flying over a rock and turning it red from the blood of the raven, and just like interesting stories that you really kind of got to sit one-on-one with those elders and know and learn from them directly by traveling through and getting that perspective. So this is like the little people. They're like the Mamagushi is the what's they call the little people. They're over there hiding under the water, the tricksters of the lake, the Mamagushi, and this is pictographs at the mouth of the Nipigon River. So legends and stories of these landscapes is interesting. And so there was a story, because up in Lake Nipigon, which is way north of Nipigon River, which is the largest river that flows into the lake, from the outflow from all that glacial history. And this is a really powerful place, and the pictographs are a story of time and past. That they say that the trickster, the Mamagushi, this little lake monster, would steal the fish from fishermen and transport it through a tunnel up to northern Lake Nipigon. And even in the 1980s, an archaeologist went in and discovered that there's a bottomless hole below these pictographs about 70 feet under the water that they just didn't go into. I would not be going in there, but that funneled all the way up 300 miles north or 200 miles north to Lake Nipigon, and where there's pictographs up there that connect those worlds. So fascinating history. Group of 7 artwork of Rossport, Cobble Peninsula, Pick Island, further east by the town of Marathon. Really powerful, vivid images of artwork, and they have a whole bunch of galleries of the Group of 7, Lawrence Harris and Franklin Carmichael, and a lot of those, Tom Thompson, famous artists with the Group of 7. And this is at Jackfish. So this is shows this booming village of Jackfish. And this is this old village. This is on the outer extent by the town of Terrace Bay. And my friend Daryl actually got a little piece of CPR land lease agreement to have a cabin there. And because you can't build cabins on Crown land, but where there's like land use permits and old mining claims, you can kind of reclaim the island, which is the case with Ken's Island, getting land available, and other people and the Nature Conservancy of Canada has brought up. But movement in the industry, when the CPR, the Canadian Pacific Railway, was built along the Canadian North Shore, this was a coal station where the rail, when it ran on coal, would dock and reload, right? And ships would reload too from the shipping industry, but when ships switched from sail to steam to diesel, this town was abandoned, and now it's a very interesting ghost town, and starting to think about like offering tours and interpretive information to this interesting village on the Canadian North Shore. That's a remnant of the past. And then commercial fishing, this is some of the guys off Port Island who still do commercial fishing with nets and boats in the area, and it's still an operational, sustainable fishery, which has come back from the Rizzo Land Trade. This is a big iron ore boat. There's actually one in the river, St. Louis River by Superior, Wisconsin, you might be familiar with, but it transported like iron ore across the lake. Like other lighthouses, this is Trowbridge Island, and then this is Battle Island, and then this is Silver Island, which is the richest silver mine in the world, in late 1880s, 1867 to 70. I forget the exact year, but it was 1,400 feet deep, a big shaft off the water, just thinking about the power and energy of the lake. And the Sleeping Giant was the protector, the Nanabushi, that protected that and uproared and destroyed the lake and stopped the silver from being accessed. So there's still a ton of silver there, but it's the spirit of the lake has stopped it from happening. So on the other side of that. And then this is a railway that goes along the shore, and I'm going to talk about an environmental catastrophe that happened in November 2007, these white beads. Has anyone seen them on the lake anywhere? South Shore, Arkansas? I don't know. It's, so I know I was talking to guys in Marquette that saw them on the sand beaches outside Marquette, and Sault Ste. Marie, down in Duluth and Bayfield. They've seen it on the other side. This is in the middle of the Canadian North Shore. Train derailment in November 2007. This is in July 2008 that we went across the site, and they're just starting to clean up. They spent about $2 million going out, cleaning up these beads with vacuums on beaches, and they're still coming back. There are very few around, but you still go to sand beaches or find cobble beaches, and these are in the mix of all these plastic beads. And now they're used by melting and forming plastic of all sorts, right? And that just derailed. There's also a rail car of lumber, and one guy actually died overloading his boat trying to get lumber. And I know Ken got some wood from that as well for his cabin. So just a bunch of nice like maple wood and like high quality tree lumber that dropped off. So, but when this happens, imagine it was oil, how that would have affected the lake, because they carry oil and fuel and all sorts of stuff on the railway. And I keep saying this this railway that's just absolutely stunning, spectacular, it goes all along the Canadian North Shore. It should be like a tourist route for trains to travel by rail and get scenic vistas of the entire North Shore the whole way, but it's only used for freight. And the Via Rail in Canada, which is a very inefficient system, especially compared to Europe and all that, even what's going on with like Amtrak in the States, it's horrible, and it goes way north into the middle of nowhere, and it doesn't go along the North Shore Lake Superior. So now I'm going to talk about present-day land stratifications with parks and different land ownerships. So this is like Arkansas National Park, this is Mishpacon Provincial Park, Lake Superior Provincial Park, and this is all crown land out here with some little provincial nature reserves and Ruby Lake Provincial Park, Sleeping Giant Provincial Park out here. We got another one here. This is a better one that kind of shows some of the provincial national parks within NMCA and like in context of Canada. And this is Lake Nipigon with Nanabushi smuggling the fish up to the top of Lake Nipigon back through that secret tunnel, which I'm interested to see. Yeah, so this is like, what if, so in the NMCA designation protecting water, this area was omitted. So mining and all that could still happen there. And it's not really stable. It's still technically a proposed marine conservation area. It's not actually established. So anything could happen in this area. It could change really fast. So what if that happened? What if mining happened? What if somebody came in and was like, no, we're going to dominate this area and mine it? It could happen. So the time to go there is now and see it and experience it and find solitude and find culture within the people that love and live for this part of the lake. So present-day stewards and conservation movements. This is the Tug of the North, Joe Marcella. He lives in Rossport, Ontario, retired Paul Porter guy. He went around in his Tug of the North. He's got a little hot tub on the back there and just lives the life. And he goes and cleans up those beads and those plastic beads, and just he's one of those dudes in boats that you want to talk to. But what's amazing about this entire area, I go out there and I see the odd American flag boat, and they don't, I kind of try to go up and talk to me, and then they leave. Like they're not used to that culture of just talking to people that are out there. But I go and talk to everybody out there. They're my lifeline. So if I see this guy, I see a guy in a boat, I'm going to be like, hey, I'm going to try to call him on the radio. I see another group of kayakers, I'm going to try to connect with them. The Lake Superior Group has restored Portrait Island Lighthouse, making this like a functional bed and breakfast and interpretive center with an art museum, and do presentations and have artists in residence there, and lots of stuff happening. So it's a pretty cool place. That's exciting times. These are sites of the Thunder Bay Field Naturalists. A Thunder Cape Bird Observatory is like a place that's funded through that, to migratory birds that come through and they net them and tag them and learn about them. And then they go to Costa Rica for the opposite time of year, and interesting people that live out there. And these are all some of the sites that Thunder Bay Field Naturalists have bought to just have protected and leave pristine. And they're an environmental group that's just trying to make sure that, so there's good news and protection happening. This is a new area for the Nature Conservancy of Canada. There's another place down towards the border, another place off Rossport, where the Nature Conservancy of Canada has bought large islands and parts of land for protection as well. And then this is the Lake Superior Water Trail, the same map I showed before, traveling through the whole area with the interpretive centers that is really adding a lot of value and strengthening the information that you can get to find out where to go up here. And this is, so the new website now, this is just a new thing with NOSTA, the Northern Ontario Tourism Organization. They have a website called superiorcountry.ca. Has all the companies and businesses, hotels, food, dining, tour operators, everything listed on there. And this is kind of like the Superior Country, they call it, that extends up. It's just like wild, the watershed of the glaciers, and interesting formations going on there. So there is a big push in Canada, a lot of young entrepreneurship like myself that are trying to establish and work together to kind of just draw more people in and operate a sustainable tourism system there. So yeah, I went back, I started doing sailing tours with Sail Superior, which has become up to there. You can do wine, cheese, and sailing charters. And now he just got funding from a Canadian agency to buy a catamaran. He's going to have a big 50-foot catamaran and do like sailing charters out on the lake, and I can do kayak tours with him together, which is pretty cool. There's a big racing community. I know in like Bayfield, I've gone to a race week down there where you go and race for a week, and it's more drinking than racing usually, but there's a big culture of the lake with the sailing racing kind of community and the business that he's doing. Yeah, so I go out, this is one of my folding kayaks. I've been a rep with Track Kayaks. It's a really neat folding expedition sea kayaks. I've taken them all around the world, and they work really well on sailboats. I can fold them up and leave them set up and do trips. With this is a new dock at Port Island, so they built a big dock that can accommodate like 6 to 10 big yachts pretty much. And they built a sauna there too. Rock and ice climbing, I got into, worked a couple winters as an ice climbing guide, just something to do up there, but it's a spectacular world-class area for that and adventure sports. And my friend runs a company there called Outdoor Skills and Thrills. I helped him write and publish a guidebook on the whole area for rock climbing too. So lots of opportunity for that. And I paddle year-round whenever I'm there, and that's why I work in Antarctica, because I can take the cold and ice and all that craziness too. But the daylight kills me. I like the daylight. But I've done some courses and broken through the ice and gotten out, and I monitored ice conditions from air photography and look at winds, and it's a whole different, I have a whole other presentation on Lake Superior ice travel, how you do that sustainably. And we're just talking about the area on the North Shore of Lake Superior being probably more challenging, or just as challenging as going to the South or North Pole because of the instability of the ice and things moving and traveling by ski or kayak. Do you use ski or kayak? Do you deal with the harsh winds and the cold? It's an Arctic polar expedition, but it's almost unfathomable to travel to outer islands of this area in winter because of the ice conditions. But this is the big sea lion arch at Sleeping Giant. That is pretty cool. This day was like minus 20, 25 Celsius with 20 knot winds. And I should have put the picture up of his pokey glove, like covered in ice, just frozen because it was so cold. I was getting splashed with water, and my jacket and dry suit beads would just freeze to it and flake off. And on the paddle too, it was crazy. Like one of the colder days I paddled. So it's such a nice day. I've been inspired by going out on this lake and other places in the world where I wake up in the morning, I look outside, and it's such a nice day. I can't think of another way to describe it because it's powerful. So I started a business called Sand. Such a nice day adventures and expeditions. Doing sea kayak skills training, paddle tours, expeditions, have an eco-lodge retreat, and do island hiking and starting a whole bunch of stuff and really maximizing that. I have some cards and some brochures, but I was kind of overwhelmed with a lot of stuff coming back and coming here, and I can get your contact if you are interested in any things. One of the big trips I'm offering is 8-day expeditions from Silver Isle to Rossport, fully catered, or using even catering, looking at options for pricing for experienced paddlers that want to have me as a guide or somebody experienced in the area to travel through and learn about it more. But they're confident, or I'm looking at doing flow plans and training, offering trainings for people, kind of briefings for people with Parks Canada before they go out. Doing lots of stuff to kind of be like kind of a guardian of the area long term and keep it going. But it's such a nice day, and that's what I like to go out having. So this is I do Voyager canoe tours as well, because I got a 34-foot Montreal canoe that we got for $500 Canadian on Kijiji from the east coast of Canada. They're just selling off. We built them fixed up and do tours. So yeah, take groups out and just have fun. We like in the Thunder Bay Harbor and do expeditions, working with school groups. Got lots of potential in the works and building potential. I really like this photo because this is like a modern day tanker at a grain elevator loading up grain, and we're paddling by in a canoe with the reflection. So I think that's a really cool perspective. This is my friend Cesar. Worked with him in Baja, Mexico, and he's an avid paddler. He wanted to come up here and see Lake Superior and experience it. I lived on a sailboat with him for half a year, traveling across the Pacific and doing a lot of stuff. So we're tight buddies, and now I'm working on getting him a visa to work with me and come back and just help me out doing like a work exchange. And he's got a good fresh energy and likes this signature jump. So he comes on my extended trips with me and adds a lot of value and amazing Mexican tacos and fish tacos, lake trip, North Shore. So this is the map. You know, we start with Silver Isle, organized shuttles. I worked with the outfitter Dave Townsend, have a good collaborative relationship with him, and run trips. And we go to wilderness campsites, old lighthouses, private cabins and saunas that are free to use for anybody on the area, and just really enjoy it yourself. Also do trips to the Slate Islands to see an isolated woodland hare trapped out there. This is some of the pictures of the sea caves and interesting places that we see out there. I'm running a little bit out of time, so I'm just going through here. But this shows some of the like pristine beaches and cliffs and beautiful things to see out here. A big storm coming in safely on shore. And this is a cave actually on the island Ken has property on. Really cool little nooks and crannies to explore. This is T Harbor from the top of the Giant. It's a provincial park. You can just go and hike up and do amazing multi-day or day hiking trips and get some of the most spectacular views you can imagine. And then this is a beach on the Slate Islands. Just beautiful, rugged, wild, pristine landscapes, untouched. And I like this, almost call this like spider water. This is one of the bay crossings in the middle of the area. And just beautiful, calm, rolling swells like the ocean. And this is the Paps. This is another formation that I'm working on developing a trail on and doing bushwhack hikes up to get amazing vistas as well. That's off the Sibley Peninsula, another area. More big granite rock formations, pristine beaches. This is actually Agate Island. It's a really cool island where there's a huge concentration of agates, but this is like an undeveloped campsite just out there in the middle of nowhere, and it's just utterly stunning and spectacular. I can't even describe it. It's amazing, but the lake can be rough, you know, like this is big waves building up. It can be rough, and then it can also be like this. I think that's a photo, but it's actually fog. You can see a little bit of an island of rock and tree, a couple ducks, a couple loons floating in the water. But yeah, you can get crazy fog conditions, so you kind of got to know what you're getting into going out there and how it can change. And it's a dynamic environment, which makes it exciting. And yeah, flat calm as far as I can see. Good fishing, lake trout, coastal brook trout, amazing. I think this is I'm not sure it's a lake trout. I think it's a coaster, I'm not sure. Moose, otters, beavers. I got caribou, I didn't get a picture of that. Just fun times in the sun. This is the Rossport Islands. My friend Karina actually drew this, and this is kind of like a little tourist map for that area. So if you're going up and want to do like a cool trip and you're doing the Lake Superior Circle Tour, this is like an ideal place to explore. It's sheltered for people at any level. Go on your own, just rent a boat from the guys here outfitters, or you can do a skills course or expedition. out there. And then Narivia. So the story of Narivia, this is like a little eco-lodge retreat out on Sittingness Island that I'm working on. I actually got offered to take it over. And but Narivia, they tried to make it a sovereign nation in the late 70s, early 80s. And the guy's getting really old, and we're trying to, he squatted on the land and got the crown land for use of ecotourism to have these little huts and offer it out to people. It has like a Narivia embassy with a national anthem and currency, and you get a title every time you go there, and it's awesome. But it's just spectacular, stunning, wild place. This is some of the cabins with the hottest and best sauna I've ever been to in my entire life. And this is the top of Mount St. Ignace. You can see all the way, you can see Isle Royale, Sleeping Giant, the Paps, the Slate Islands, Pick Island, even down towards the Puckasaw Coast from the top of this mountain on a clear day, and it's absolutely stunning. We recently refurbished the trail a little bit, so it's a little more accessible, but we're still working on maps of it and getting that information out. This is another, I do a full day hike. This is near the border, looking at Pie Island, and you can see Isle Royale is like out this way. Beautiful hike on Spar Island called the Top of the World Hike. A day paddle from the coast out, and I do that as a day trip. And then do skills courses from beginner to advanced of all sorts, and bring in other instructors. So I'm going to end just by reading this poem, because it's just an amazing story that my friend Jess wrote that really resonates with me. And then if you guys want to talk with me after, I'll be outside, and I have a few copies of the book and information on all that. So there is a land in the north that will take your breath away. Even at first sight, this beauty and power so wild will breathe into your soul and stir within your heart. It exists at an edge. This place, a boundary between two great worlds. Here, a seascape meets the land. This land is a temple, unique and storied, rugged and wild. This sea, the breath, blood, and force of the sacred mystery. Watch and be shown 1,000 faces in the divine. Like lovers, they hold each other, forever shaped in their delicate intimacy. Fated, carved out by the mystery pretense of control. Playful and laughing, a paradise in that sparkling brilliance. Mysterious and cold in a thick morning fog. 1,000 faces of the divine, hidden or revealed by the dance of changing light. She has taken life, she gives life. Linger here and it will change you. Let it beckon and entice. Dare to gaze deeply. Move but 10 inches and gasp at some new beauty. Plunge into this world of mystery and enchantment. Be drunk with the raw beauty and sacredness of this place. Come sit near this edge and be wild. Thank you. Wow, exactly 1 hour. That was spot on.